G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Drux Milan Unboxing. A happy and prosperous 2023 to you. Molweni manene na manene kazi, namkile kile kwenkubo, sinengwena lela unyaka omcha odwela yimpumelelo namatam sangha. 2022 is behind us and it's a good time to review the year that was in South African boxing. I'm going to touch on international boxing a little bit just to make it interesting. We've had our ups and downs in South African boxing. If we look at things outside the ring, like promoters failing to put on shows, Boxing South Africa, that's not always quick enough to act or transparent enough in their actions, and inept officiating and all those issues that plague boxing, not only here but internationally. Boxing has had its fair share of black eyes. But as you know, I like to concentrate on what happens inside the ring, and we've had a very active 2022. A lot of our boxers fought overseas with mixed success, and activity is always good. So if we concentrate on the sport itself, the boxing that happens in the ring, then I think we have had a good year in South African boxing. We've had Sifiso Shongwe putting on 12 cards on ESPN Africa this year. That's incredible, very active. Got to attend one of them in Joburg recently and meet Sifiso Shongwe himself. Very well done to them. Then we had the Old Faithful Golden Gloves putting on 5 cards this year. And then also we had Kaba Promotions putting on, I think it was 3 cards this year. And various other promoters also did their bit. So great with that we had all this activity. Now, first category I'm going to start with, I'm going to do several categories. We're going to go through comeback of a year, upset of a year, knockout of a year, fight of a year, and fighter of a year. Of course, my highly unofficial awards. I know the ring has got their own, and boxing news has got their own. We all have our own. I'm talking about the calendar year for 2022, and keep in mind I can only talk about the fights that I've actually seen. Some fights were never televised, so I can't talk about that, and I don't always get to see every single fight. I also have other things outside of boxing. So feel free to disagree with me, feel free to tell me your opinions in the comment section below. These things are always contentious, and that's the way it should be, and that's what's nice about this forum, how we can talk to each other. Now, comeback of a year here in South Africa for me, you know, it's not always a fighter that's retired and came back. It's somebody who's changed his career trajectory. Now, there's a junior featherweight over here, Tato Bonokwane, and to me here in South Africa, he gets my award for comeback of a year. Now, he was sort of mulling around in his career as a journeyman. I remember a few years back, I saw him in the Orient Theatre against former South African featherweight champion Asanda Gringi. And he gave Gingley a tough, he gave him a workout and he lost on points, but he didn't really threaten to win, but he was tough, he hung in there. And that's sort of been his career trajectory. Lost on points to guys like Lerato Dlamini, had a draw and a points lost to another South African champion, Innocent Mantengu. And in 2022, he suddenly started turning his career around. In 2021, he ended losing to 16-8 and 3 fighter Said Chino. So there's nothing very promising with Tato Bonokwane. But in 2022, he pulled off 3 wins in a row. He avenged his loss to Innocent Mantengo, winning a 12-round decision. And after Innocent Mantengu, he fought a Filipino, Jalil Payal. And Payao came into the fight with a 17-1 record, and Bonokwane managed to knock out Payao in the 12th and final round. And if that was not enough, he ended the year by winning a 12-round decision over Diego Alberto Ruiz, which netted him WBF world titles. Now, it's one of the smaller sanctioning bodies, not really a recognized world title, but from a journeyman to a belt holder, albeit with a minor organization, that's quite a comeback for Tato Bonokwane. So for me, Tato Bonokwane is the guy that turned his career around from a journeyman to a fighter that suddenly you can talk about. You know, I'm thinking at the back of my head, you know, the junior featherweight division in South Africa. I think the number 1 guy is clearly Lodumo Lamati, and he has now moved up to featherweight. He's no longer a junior featherweight. So we could maybe say that Tato Bonokwane is now our top junior featherweight. So let's see if he can continue his run. Internationally, comeback of a year. It's hard to say, but you know, Deontay Wilder, the last time we saw him in the ring, he was badly beaten up by Tyson Fury, managed to knock Fury down twice, drifted away from boxing. We thought that maybe it was retirement for him, but he came back with a bang and knocked cold Robert Helenius, a Nordic Nightmare, inside a round. So internationally, I think Deontay Wilder perhaps could be comeback of a year, because he is back with a bang. Then if we move on from that and we look at upset of a year, for me, Bongani Mahlangu. This is another fight in the junior featherweight division. And Bongani Mahlangu is 41 years old. Now, if you are 41 years old, I see here he's actually 42 years old. You know, it's very old for a lightweight fighter. And he had a win and a loss in Tanzania. And when he came back to South Africa, and he faced 10-0 prospect Ayabonga Sonjika in the Orient Theatre for the South African and the IBF Continental Africa title. So Bongani Mahlangu was supposed to just be another test for the youngster, maybe go the distance, show him some new looks, and he upset everybody by scoring a knockout out of the blue in the 6th round and knocking out Ayabonga Sonjika, giving the young man his first loss. So for me, upset of the year in South Africa was that knockout win of Bongani Mahlangu over Ayabonga Sonjika. And so I'll give upset of the year here in South Africa to Mahlangu. Internationally, who scored the upset of the year? Well, nobody expected Dimitri Bivol to beat Canelo Alvarez, and yet he did, but he was a much bigger man. I would rather say upset of the year to me goes to Jai Opetaia, a cruiserweight, the Australian cruiserweight. He was a good amateur, but when he challenged Maurice Breedis, who of course won the World Series, World Boxing Super Series Cup, as well as the Ring Magazine title, along with his IBF World title. Jai Opetaia fighting through a broken jaw and managing to win a decision against Maurice Breedis to become the Ring and IBF World Cruiserweight Champion. On the international scene, to me, I think that can qualify for upset of the year. Now, if we're looking at knockout of the year, that is always something that thrills fans. It's always something that adds to the drama of boxing. And we've had some good ones. We've had Kholisani Ndongeni knocking out Apinung Kongsong, and we had Lodumo Lamati stopping Geraldo, Mark Anthony Geraldo, with a straight right to the body. That was I like body shot knockouts. That was a good knockout too. And sometimes, you know, you have to give credit where credit is due, even though it hurts you. I was in the International Convention Centre in East London when Landi Ngeke took on undefeated South African fighter, took on Jair Rakinal from the Philippines. A tough little southpaw from the Philippines, and he broke our hearts, but you got to give credit where credit is due. Rakinal nailed Ngeke in the second round with a straight left from a southpaw stance, and then just threw in a 1-2, and that had Ngeke falling hard onto his back. He somehow made it to his feet in a follow-up flurry and made the referee finally jump in. That could have stopped it right there when he went down, and that was a spectacular sort of stoppage. So I'm going to give knockout of the year here in South Africa to a non-South African fighter, the visitor Jair Rakinal from the Philippines. To me, that was the knockout of the year, even though it didn't turn out the way we would have wanted to. Then fight of the year, I would say on the undercard of the last show of ESPN Africa, there was a really good junior middleweight fight between Jacques Chikubu Muvud from the DRC and Darren Rousseau. It was action round after round all the way until Rousseau won an 8-round decision. It was a fight that really didn't deserve a loser, and it was that good. Now, Jacques Chikubu Muvud was a fighter that I was aware of also years back during the COVID times when we had no crowds allowed. I was sitting there in an empty theatre next to Rodney Berman, and we had Jacques Chikubu Muvud fighting Shavonte Koopman, one of South Africa's top up-and-comers. And he went after Koopman, and Koopman won a decision, but he gave Koopman everything he could handle. He had to fight for every second. And afterwards, Rodney said to me, "This Muvud guy, we must use him again. He really brings it." and and then he didn't end up on Golden Gloves, but he popped up again here at ESPN Africa, and I hope to see a lot more of him. In the end, I think Darren Rousseau, the difference was his hard jab. He has a great jab. He used that jab well when he used it. He should have used it more maybe. And I think it was a close fight, but Rousseau's punches just had a little bit more effect on Mavoud than Mavoud had on Rousseau. So it was close rounds. It was hard to score. But I think, of course, Mavoud's handlers will disagree with me, but I think Darren Rousseau did enough to win that fight. I think Jacques Chikubu Mavoud once again came very close and gave us a great fight. But that was a fantastic fight. And that's one of the fights I think of when I think of fight of the year. And the other fight, of course, is on the Golden Glove show, Rourke Knapp and Brandon Tayser, the rematch. To me, that was another epic fight. You know, you had Brandon Tayser going after Rourke in the first round. You thought Rourke was going to get stopped. Rourke gathered himself, clawed his way back into the fight. And then it was Tayser fighting and Rourke Knapp surprisingly turning boxer and boxing in and out. And the fight had a lot of drama on ebb and flow with both fighters having their success, and ended up a split decision win for Rourke Knapp. So those are the two fights that stand out for me in South Africa as fight of the year candidates. There were others as well, like Phumelele Kafu and Jackson Chauke. The first fight that were very good. If I'm forced to pick between them, I'm going to go for Rourke Knapp and Brandon Tayser. That rematch that Knapp won on a split decision. To me, that was fight of the year here in South Africa. Those other two fights, especially the one also between Mavoud and Rousseau on the undercard of ESPN Africa, that deserves a very solid mention as well. But I'm going to go for Knapp and Tayser. There was the same amount of drama. I think they're just fighters that are further in their career, obviously, than Rousseau and Mavoud, so a little bit more quality. But those were great fights. So Knapp and Tayser, for me, the rematch, that was the fight of the year. If we're looking at female fights, and then I've got to say the fight in the beginning of 2022 between Hedda Wolmerans and Roof Chizalev, to me, that was the female fight of the year. Chizalev started very well. I had Wolmerans looking completely out of sorts. At some point, I thought Roof Chizalev was going to work her way to a stoppage over Hedda. It looked that grim for Hedda because Chizalev got the distance right and stayed on her chest and worked her over on the ropes. But then Hedda, to her credit, started clawing her way back into the fight. And in the last round, she hurt Chizalev, almost stopped her. I didn't agree with the margins of the scorecards. The 96-94 card was okay for me. The 97-93, I don't know. That's too wide of a margin. It was a very, very close fight. I think Wolmerans got back into the fight in the later half, and she did manage to hurt Chizalev in the end. That could have just have given her the edge. A 2-point or a 1-point margin for either lady, I wouldn't have argued if Roof Chizalev got the decision by a close margin or Hedda got the decision by a close margin. It's a fight that really deserves a rematch. I chatted to Colin Nathan. I know they want a rematch, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be happening, which is a pity. But if Hedda Wolmerans goes on to do something major in her career, that would have been a baptism of fire, a big learning experience for her. And it was an action-packed female fight. If we look at the fight of a year internationally, for me, it's going to be that fight between the featherweight fight between Leigh Wood and Michael Conlan, where Wood roared back to eventually knock Conlan through the ropes. To me, that British fight, that All British Showdown, goes fight of the year. If I have to go for knockout of the year internationally, I would say Joe Joyce for me. The way he came back in that 11th round and knocked Joe Parker out with a left hook, that was classic stuff to me. Big time, what big time heavyweight boxing should be. And if we go for fight of the year internationally for the female fights, I would say you can't go wrong with a fight in Madison Square Garden, the first time two female fighters headline, and that's of course Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. Just like Hedda and Roof Chizalev, it was a fight that was very close, that everybody had different opinions on the decision. Taylor squeaked home, but it's a fight that had it all. I also thought at this stage Serrano was going to knock out Taylor, and she clawed her way back into it. So for me, the knockouts of a year in South Africa, the Filipino Jaya Rakinal, who knocked out Landry Ngeke. Internationally, the heavyweight Joe Joyce, who knocked out Joe Parker. And if we look at fight of the year, I'm going to give it to Knapp and Tyson, the rematch here locally. Internationally, I think it was Michael Conlon and Lee Wood. And then we get to fighter of the year. Now, who was a South African fighter of the year? It's a difficult one this year. So let's look at all the big international performances by South Africans. And let's also look at the guys who didn't manage to get to win. In the beginning of the year, we had Thabiso Unu challenging Junior Makabu. It was a rematch of a fight they had years before. And ironically, it happened in the States. And it was a very close fight. Makabu got a split decision, a controversial split decision. There were many that felt that Thabiso Unu did enough to win that fight. For me, I looked at the fight. I also scored it for Thabiso Unu by a point or two, but it was a very close fight. Unu, I think, did the quality counters, but Makabu was more aggressive. He was busier, although not always effective aggression. So it was also a fight that I felt was legitimately close, but could have gone either way. So I don't think Thabiso Unu, even though he didn't capture the WBC title, feel very bad for him there. He is still a top contender worldwide. So I think it was a loss that he really has no reason to hang his head about. I think next time take a bit more chances, be a bit more aggressive to take that world title. But he's heading towards another world title eliminator. Junior Makabu, I believe, is going to be defending against Noel Gevor back in the States again. So that was Thabiso Unu. We also had Yanga Sigribo fighting a freeweight world champion in Kosei Tanaka here towards the end of the year. Now, I predicted on this forum that I thought when I was analyzing a fight with Welcome Nita, the great Welcome Nita, I thought that Tanaka would be too much for Yanga Sigribo, and I picked Tanaka to stop Sigribo in the second half of the fight. Now, I can eat my words. Tanaka did win as I expected, but Yanga Sigribo hung tough and he went to full 12 rounds. He was well beaten, but he had his moments in the fight, and he did compete with a freeweight world champion in Kosei Tanaka, and that is almost what I can say is a good loss, because Yanga now knows that he can compete on the top international Big Four organization world title level. He knows that he can compete with those guys at least. So it's a question of going back to the drawing board and ironing out the mistakes and working on what he can work on. So I think also, even though he was well beaten, it wasn't a close fight like Unu and Makabu or a controversial decision. I think Yanga Sigribo hung tough when he took a big step up in class. So it is a loss, but it's not a bad loss. And then we had Thulani Mbenge taking on Souleymane Cissokho, undefeated French fighter there in France, in Nantes, France. And he also lost a very, very close decision. I thought Cissokho did enough to edge it. I thought Tools did very well in that fight. I think he had his moments. He started off well. I think he just lacked the imagination or the versatility to change tactics when one thing wasn't working. He was very effective taking away Cissokho's jab, and he just couldn't nail Cissokho enough, and couldn't really hurt him and put him down to make the win clear. He just wasn't able to do that, and Cissokho scored in spurts with flashy, quick combinations and got the decision that way. So it's Thulani Mbenge's second loss. First one was against Sebastian Formella. It's very, very hard to win a close fight on the road. It just is what it is. I thought Cissokho did just enough to win that fight. But it's a fight that can make or break Thulani Mbenge. Him and Sean Smith, they can work on it. They can figure out what they did wrong, and they can come back better as a result of it. It was, once again, not a bad loss. It's a loss that can be a learning experience. You can come back from that. Remember, great fighters like Vuyani Bungu, he even had losses before he became a world champion. So it can be one of those kind of losses. Now we go to the winners of a year. You know, we also have to mention Kevin Lerena fought Daniel Dubois on the Tyson Fury main supporting bout as a heavyweight, and we know Kevin is undersized for heavyweight. And for a round or two, it looked like he was one intense flurry away from scoring a massive upset. Had Dubois down 3 times in the first round, and then inexplicably he just didn't step on the gas. I wanted him to let his hands go and just keep firing until Dubois falls over, because Dubois was very unsteady on his legs. Dubois got his steadiness back and planted his feet and knocked out Kevin in the third round. You know, I think Dubois had a bit of help from the referee as well, as we all know. I don't know if that was in the end the big difference. Kevin had his opportunity there, and he didn't capitalize on it. So that was that. But he did a lot better than people expected him to do, and he can always, of course, come back from that. Now let's look at the wins. We have Heki Butler. You know, we thought we were going to see the end of an old guard. We had Moruti Mtalane, the former great flyweight champion, having his last fight here in KwaZulu-Natal, won that well enough and retired. So that is goodbye and happy retirement, and thank you for all the great memories to a great champion like Moruti Mtalane. And the thinking was we're going to also see the end of Heki Butler and Zolani Tete this year. Heki went up to Mexico and he fought the former WBO champion Alvin Soto, and that was a fight that he was not favoured to win at all. I thought he would give Soto a lot of trouble. I thought Heki is a difficult style for Soto, but I didn't think he'd do enough to overcome fighting on foreign soil with everything you have to overcome with a crowd and the biased judging and so on. And Heki managed to pull it off. And we must keep in mind that Alvin Soto, at the time that Heki fought him in 2022, was still ranked in the top 10 of the Ring and the Transnational Boxing Rankings Board. And that counts for a lot, because the Ring and the Transnational Boxing Rankings Board, those are the most respected independent rankings in the world. For the business of boxing, you have to worry about the WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO rankings. For the business aspect, it's important in terms of who fights whom, but if you want to see who more or less get a gauge of who are the quality fighters in the world, you've got to look at these independent ranking systems, because we all know the sanctioning bodies are political. Depends how you lobby for your fighter and how many sanctioning fees you've paid them for belts and how your promoter is connected. But Alvin Soto was a legit top 10 ranked junior flyweight in the world. He was just off from being a world champion. And Heki fought him, and Heki boxed a masterpiece in my opinion, and he scored a flash knockdown, and it turns out he needed that flash knockdown because it was very, very, very close on the cards. Once again, I thought he won quite easily and clearly, but he had to squeak home with a very close decision, and he needed that flash knockdown to win. Shows you how difficult it is to win on the road. So great performance by Heki Butler. He looked as good as ever. He boxed very well. So Heki Butler is in the running for Fighter of the Year of 2022 with his win over Alvin Soto. It was a WBC eliminator, so he's a mandatory challenger for Kenshiro Taraji, who now is the unified WBA, WBC and the Ring champion. So what an opportunity that could be if Heki faces Kenshiro. Shiro, I think, wants to fight Gonzalez to unify the WBO title first, but then he'll have to face Heki, and if Heki can somehow pull it off against Kenshiro, that would be a legacy-making fight. He'd have his old Ring and WBA belt back, plus the WBC and perhaps even the WBO belt. But ifs and buts and fruits and nuts, you know what they say. That fight still has to happen. So for now, Heki scored a great victory over Alvin Soto. And then we had Zolani Tete, last born there from the Mecca of East London. He took on Jason Cunningham for the Commonwealth title and a few other belts as well in the junior featherweight division, and he scored a spectacular knockout. And that could have been a candidate for knockout of the year as well, and that could have been comeback of the year as well. The only problem is, months later, Zolani Tete tested positive for prohibited substance. They asked for a B sample. I don't know what the result of that is going to be. I haven't heard anything yet, but the B sample I don't know of any case where it has contradicted the findings of an A sample, so he'll be facing a ban at age 35. Tragically, that could mean the end of his career. So, Zolani Tete, we were on a high and now we're on a low after that fight. And then with Moruti Mthalani's exit, we finally got ourselves a new major world champion when Sivenati Nonchinga went to Mexico and managed to win a split decision over Hector Flores Calisto, a fight that was nominated in some circles for Fight of the Year. It was a tremendous fight. It was for a vacant IBF junior flyweight title, the title Felix Alvarado vacated, and it was a fantastic fight. Nonchinga had an opponent that we were not sure how good he really was. He won on the road in the UK, looked quite impressive, and then he had a couple of draws that didn't look so impressive. But it turns out Hector Flores Calisto is a fighter that's for real, and he gave Nonchinga all he could handle. Nonchinga scored a flash knockdown, a solid knockdown, but a quick knockdown, and that helped him on the cards to win a split decision because Sivenati Nonchinga started off well. Then after that, Flores Calisto got a fire under his backside, and he clawed his way back into the fight. Great body shots, lots of back and forth action, and just as it looked like the Mexican was ready to overwhelm Nonchinga, Colin Nathan gave him that big Freddie Roach style speech in the corner, and got him going again. And there you had it. Nonchinga got himself, pulled the fight out of a fire, survived the last lunch round search by the Mexican, and won a split decision and a world title and a hero's welcome in East London. So if we're talking about Fight of the Year for South Africa, Fighter of the Year, it's between Heki Butler and Sivenati Nonchinga. With Heki Butler, we can argue that in that WBC eliminator, he in fact beat a higher ranked opponent internationally in terms of independent ranking systems than Sivenati Nonchinga did. Hector Flores Calisto wasn't ranked by the Ring or by Transnational Boxing Board going into a fight. But, that doesn't always say anything. It seems that Flores Calisto was better than everybody thought. And it's between Sivenati Nonchinga and Heki Butler. I'm going to say Fighter of the Year for 2022 South Africa is Sivenati Nonchinga because we badly needed a major world champion back in South Africa, especially nice that he's back in Mecca. And Sivenati Nonchinga, he also did the trick in only his 11th pro bout. Took him 11 pro bouts to go all the way to world champion in the major 4 organizations. And that is a new South African record for number of fights to become a world champion, 11 fights. So I'm going to give Boxer of the Year to Sivenati Nonchinga with a very honorable mention to Heki Butler. You can make the argument that he should be Boxer of the Year, but I'm going to lean towards Sivenati Nonchinga for this one. Internationally, who should be Boxer of the Year? For me, it's Dimitri Bivol. What a year he's had. He went and he beat Canelo Alvarez, the biggest star in boxing, to retain his light heavyweight title. And then he ended the year by giving Alberto Zurdo Ramirez, a much physically bigger fighter than him once they stood in the ring, giving him a boxing lesson. So I think Dimitri Bivol, the WBA light heavyweight champion of the world, he should be Fighter of the Year internationally for 2022. Let's hope we can now see Dimitri Bivol against Artur Beterbiev. If Beterbiev gets past Anthony Yarde in his next fight, and all indications is that he should. I would love to see Beterbiev against Bivol for all the marbles at light heavyweight and the ring belt on stake as well. That's something I would like to see in 2023. So for me, Fighter of the Year in South Africa, Sivenati Nonchinga, internationally Dimitri Bivol. And that's it from me. If I mustn't forget, I must also pick a female Fighter of the Year. In South Africa, it's hard. We didn't have that much action. ESPN Africa gave a lot of action to the female fighters. And even though she's not South African, she's trained by Vusi Mtolo. She fights here in South Africa. So I'm going to give Female Fighter of the Year in South Africa to Ellen Simwaka. She won 4 fights this year. She's been active. She had a very epic Fight of the Year candidate against Sharadine Fortuin. and she managed to eke that win out. And Ellen Simwaka in the ring, her style of fighting, it really is nothing pretty. She doesn't have the greatest technique. She's not slick. She's not smooth. She's just in incredible condition. She's very rough and tumble. She'll get into the rough stuff like we've seen in a Fortuyn fight. She's rough and tumble. She is an uncut diamond, but she's in great shape. She's got a lot of fighting art, and she fights like a nickname, the Tigress. It's not pretty, but she gets the win in the end of the day. So female fight over here in South Africa, I'll have to say it's Ellen Simwaka. And if we have to go female fighter over here internationally, to me it's Claressa Shields. Her fight with Savannah Marshall was also a close runner-up for female fight over here in my book, next to Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. And Claressa Shields has just been dominant, and she just outworked, outfought, outboxed Savannah Marshall, in my opinion, who was always dangerous right through the fight. So female fight over here internationally, to me, it's Claressa Shields. So that's it from me. That's what I think, that's who I think were the big winners of 2022. And I'm looking forward to 2023. So please tell me what you guys think. Tell me if you agree or you disagree. And until we see each other again,